Okay, hello everyone. Looks like we have a good number of people here, so very happy. Welcome everyone to the webinar on accessibility metadata. Very glad to have you here. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Gregorio and Christina are here with us, as well as our interpreters. So we'll get to the housekeeping in a moment about how to connect to the interpretation function for those of you who need it. But good afternoon and welcome to the ACUP and Livre Canada Books webinar on accessibility metadata and export. Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Gabrielle Echeverry. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at Livre Canada Books, and I'm just here to introduce our speakers today and facilitate any Q&A at the end of the session, as well as answer any technical questions you might have during the webinar. So before we get started, as usual, I want to just give a little bit of housekeeping notes. We'll be providing French interpretation for those of you who need it, as usual. And the presentation should take about an hour in total, with about a half an hour at the end for Q&A. We'll see how long that actually lasts. But la présentation d'aujourd'hui sera en anglais avec interprétation simultanée en français et devrait durer environ 60 minutes. Et nous avons prévu du temps à la fin pour répondre à vos questions. So, for those of you who need interpretation, pour accéder à l'interprétation vers le français, cliquez sur l'icône interprétation au bas de votre écran dans les commandes pour la réunion, et ça ressemble à une globe. Et par la suite, sélectionnez la langue de votre choix. Ensuite, en ce cas, ce sera le français. For those of you who do not require interpretation, please leave the interpretation feature off. You should be fine without it. But again, if you have any technical issues, please let us know. After the presentation is complete, we'll be taking questions in both languages via the Q&A function. We ask that you please try and use the Q&A chat function for that specifically, or we'll try to direct you to the Q&A if you're in the chat. Et nous vous invitons à poser des questions via la fonction questions-réponses. N'hésitez pas à soumettre les questions tout au long du webinaire. Nous les recueillerons pour la séance de questions qui aura lieu à la fin. So even if you want to ask questions throughout the presentation, we'll just wait until the end to answer any of those. And if there are any really technical, detailed questions that come up after the presentation and we don't have time to cover them today, I invite you to send me an email with those questions. I'll collect them and forward them on to Fondazione LIA on your behalf. So of course, if you encounter any problems with the technical Zoom at all, please let me know. But from what I can see, I have not received any messages so far about technical issues, and we can see our presenters well from where I'm looking at them, at least. So I will start an introduction of the webinar itself. We're very pleased to be hosting this follow-up webinar to our session back in November that introduced the questions of metadata, accessibility metadata for export specifically. Today, our follow-up webinar is delving into some more technical aspects of accessibility metadata. And so we'll be learning a little bit about how to create this metadata in different feeds. And we'll have some really exciting news from Gregorio about some recent developments in this vein. I'd like to take a moment before Gregorio and Christina get started to also do a shout out to the Association of Canadian University Presses, who are co-organizing this webinar, as well as the webinar that preceded it and the brochure that will follow, also on accessibility metadata that Fondazione LIA is creating for this purpose. We have been very lucky to have secured funds from the last special call through the Accessible Digital Books Initiative that Canadian Heritage had had put in place for several years. And this, as part of this initiative, we decided to work on this project together as two organizations to bring this really essential information to the industry. So thank you to ACUP, and thank you to Gregorio and Cristina of Fondazione LIA. I'll let you get started. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen so Cristina can start with the introduction. Please, Cristina, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for possibility to participate in this event. I see in the list of the participants some good friends, and I see new people, so I will just provide you a brief information on who we are and what Foundation is. I am Cristina Musinelli. I'm the Secretary General of the LIA Foundation, and we are really strongly involved in all the working group and activity group in the publishing industry that are involved in accessibility in publishing. We are very focused on standard, and everything we will present today is based on international standards, so it's not things that are invented by Fondazione LIA. We work to make what is possible in accessibility in reality in the publishing value chain. With me, there is Gregorio Pellegrino. He is a software engineer. He has a very strong knowledge in digital publishing, but in the last year, he is our Chief Accessibility Officer. He is our expert in accessibility. He takes part in all our activity of consulting, training with international and national organizations. And specifically, we are now focusing on more complex layout books and production workflows, where we are aiming at integrating accessibility in the traditional production workflow also for print books, because we believe that accessibility should be embedded as much as possible in the production since the beginning. Gregorio, we have done in the previous meeting some information on standard to express accessibility, on how to create accessibility metadata, explain what the LIA system does and how it works, and how to display accessibility metadata to end user, and what to do if a publication is not accessible. Then will be the question and answer session. So if you have questions, you may write in the answer and question chat, and we will try to answer at the end of the presentation. What is Fondazione LIA? Fondazione LIA is a quite strange kind of organization, because it's a no-profit foundation that has been created by the Italian Publisher Association in collaboration with the Italian Blind Union. I don't think that there is any other organization of such kind. We also have in the foundation as a member the Italian Dyslexia Association, because we are mainly speaking, when we speak about accessibility, of blind and visually impaired people, but also people with dyslexia can benefit from many of the features of a accessible file and accessible reading solution. And we also have the specialist organization that work in Italy in the production of mainly educational books. That is a library for blind, Regina Margherita of Monza. And I think this also is another important element, because we know how the specialist organization work, which is activities I do, and so on. We also have a publisher as member of the foundation, and we have 17 publishing companies, but much more imprints, and we have all the big ones, but also some very small, medium publishers. And since our goal was to provide to visually impaired people the same experience and the same opportunity as any other reader, we decided since the beginning to involve also the most important lending digital platform who works in Italy with many libraries. And it's Media Library Online. I think it's very well known in Italy, maybe you know also abroad. And so that people can both buy the born accessible publications sold in the mainstream distribution channel as required by the new legislation, the European Accessibility Act, that will get enforced by June 2025 for all customers in Europe, and also have the possibility to lend the book in the library ecosystem. So this was the main goal. As I explained before, we are the goal of the foundation, Gregorio, the slide are not okay, is to promote accessibility and the culture of accessibility in the publishing field. And the goal is to allow people with reading disability to choose what they want to read without any difference from any other reader, and fostering so the participation in the world of culture, school, and work. We are speaking not only of trade books, fiction, non-fiction, but we are speaking also of educational content, academic and professional content. So all the kind of books that of digital publication that the publisher can produce. We do a lot of things. We do research and development activity. We do also event to raise awareness in the publishing industry of the relevance of accessibility, but we also offer services to publisher and to the other actor of the value chain. And the services are mainly consultancy, training course, audit of platform and publication. And also we do a quality insurance service to check the quality of the accessible file produced by the publisher. And this is strictly related with metadata because, as Gregorio will explain later, the control of the quality insurance of accessibility and the creation of metadata is strictly related with the activity we do within LIA. As highlighted before, we don't invent a standard, but everything we do is based on already existing standard. So we are part of all the organizations that are working in the standard world. We are part of the W3C World Wide Web Consortium, in the Publishing Business Group, in the EPUB Community Group, in the EPUB Maintenance Group. So all the working group and groups that in W3C manage the standard for digital publication and also for reading solution and website. We are part of the DAISY Consortium. We started working with them because I was member of IDPF, and the choice of LIA to create a mainstream public ecosystem started when we incorporate in EPUB all the specification from the DAISY format. And this was the first time that there was a format that could be shared by publisher and visually impaired people. We worked there in the diagram standard project, and Gregorio also managed the Better EPUB from InDesign activity, where we are working to provide to Adobe information on how to create in a better and simple way accessible file from an InDesign process. We are part of the European Digital Reading Lab because reading solution is a key element of the experience of a blind and visually impaired people to access the content. And also there is another area that is use of DRM that not impede accessibility for people with disability. We are part of ISO, that is the International Standard Organization, because we are working to understand if there are need to make an international ISO standard for some of the standard we are speaking before. And last but not least, and this is a topic that today is the most important one, we are member of Editeur, and we work with them in, I think we started the work in 2011 when we started as a project defining with them the ONIX code list 196 was based on the work done by Fondazione LIA, and we work also in schema.org, where we work to maintain the metadata of schema. I leave Gregorio the floor.
Thanks, Christina. So to start today's session, I would like to refresh what we spoke about in our previous webinar, just to be sure that we are all on the same page. So why accessibility is important? It is important for a social commitment. It is important since it brings innovation into publishing houses and into the whole supply chain, and also because there is a push from a legislation point of view. For example, you should know that in Europe, we have the European Accessibility Act that will come in force in 2025, next year in June. And there are requirements in this act, both for e-commerce, about displaying accessibility information about the products and the service that are sold to the end users, and to the ebook files and e-reading solutions. And also in these requirements, metadata about accessibility are one of the important things. So why accessibility metadata are important? Accessibility metadata are the link between the different actors of the digital ecosystem, from the content creator, meaning the publisher, to the end user, because through the metadata, you can give information to the end user about the characteristics and the features of your digital publication. That's why without metadata, ebooks are invisible. Let's take, for example, that you spend a lot of money for making a super perfect, fully accessible EPUB, but then you don't put metadata in it. It means that all the work that you have done is completely hidden to the reader, to the end user. So you spent a lot of effort and money, and at the end, the end user doesn't know it, and he has to download it, to download a sample to test if your file is okay or not. Then we came to the question, who creates accessibility metadata? There are pros and cons to each actor creating accessibility metadata. Publishers knows normally the publication they produce, so they know them really, really well. They know if there are mathematical formulas or images within a publication, but sometimes do not have the strong knowledge about accessibility metadata, because accessibility metadata is a complex topic. There are more than 40 different values that you can apply to a specific publication. Then we have distributors. Distributors are normally quite strong on metadata, so they know how to manage metadata. They may not know your publication as well as a publisher, and maybe they are quite familiar with accessibility, but they do not have a specific knowledge or a strong knowledge on accessibility topic. And then there is a third option, which is the accessibility certifier, meaning who do the quality assurance of your publication from an accessibility point of view. This is the work that we do in Fondazione LIA. We check the publication. We run the publication through different tools and through a manual check. And as an output, I will show you that later, we automatically create the accessibility metadata. So crossing both knowledge about the publication, because we check file by file, page by page, and we also have a strong knowledge on accessibility metadata, so we do that. There are many challenges for managing metadata. One, as I mentioned in the previous slide, is the need for specific skill sets. Also, accessibility metadata are updating a lot. In the last year, we had more than 10 new codes for expressing accessibility of digital publications. That's why we have a lot of data to manage. And so there is probably a need for an expert. We then dig a little bit on accessibility standards, accessibility metadata standards. And we have seen that there are different standards for different domains. We have Onyx, which is normally used in the trade publishing, and it is used to announce a book and to send information about the book, about the ebook, to different stores. Then we have EPUB metadata that are inside the publication, so inside the file that is then downloaded and read on digital devices. And we have the MARC standard with different flavors that is mostly used in the library ecosystem. So we have different standards and we have different way to express metadata. That's why it's so important to focus on machine readable metadata. What do we mean with machine readable metadata? We mean metadata that can be interpreted automatically by machines. We will see what that means. It means that normally for humans are not that simple to understand. It depends. But things can be interpreted by machines. Machines can do various things on that. They can localize metadata in different languages, for example. They present metadata, they can group metadata, they can find a good way to express metadata to end user. They can check and valid metadata to be sure that they represent the actual reality of the publication. So for us, the importance of machine readable metadata is really, really high. And then we, going through the supply chain, we go to the quite last step, which is the step where the reader goes to a e-lending platform or e-commerce or an online catalog, and for looking for ebooks, and he wants to know something about the accessibility of the ebooks he is interested in. And so we are working, and we will show you something because we are part of this great work on guidelines for displaying accessibility metadata. We are working all the work that we are doing in this field. So we are ready. Now we are ready to start. I think we can go on. Today will be a more technical webinar. We will look at the two main standards, Onyx and EPUB metadata. We will look a little bit on the code side, but do not worry. It will be something that will be comprehensible by everyone, I hope. And we will check also some tools that may help you in both creating the metadata and putting the metadata in your publications or distributing the metadata. Let's start. Let's start with this slide about the strategic role of accessibility metadata. Accessibility metadata are important for your ebook e-commerce, so your website, for digital library service, for the books in print catalog, which is normally the catalog that logs all the books available in a specific market, for your publisher website to show the commitment that you have on accessibility, for e-learning platforms, for the teacher for deciding what to buy, what to adopt for their class. And also in printed promotional materials, we see more and more publishers that print accessibility information about their books, also in printed books, telling, okay, this is the print book, but if you buy the digital one, you will have these accessibility features. Let's dig into the standards to express the accessibility metadata. And let's start with Onyx. I love Onyx. Onyx is based on XML, is a powerful standard that is developed and maintained by Editor, which is a non-for-profit organization based in UK, but the standard is adopted worldwide, and this standard is used both for printed books and for digital books, and helps the supply chain to communicate in a standard way. So no Excel files, no strange CSV files, no, standard way. And in Onyx, we have a specific code list, which is code list 196, that describes the accessibility features of a digital publication. Within this list, we have 3 types of data that we can express. Those are groups. Then we have single codes for each single feature. The first type is compliance with accessibility standard, meaning you want to express that your publication comply with a known standard. The code 01, so the first code is LIA, because we were the first standard worldwide for EPUB publications. Then we have different codes for expressing the compliance to the EPUB accessibility guidelines, and to refer to different level of web content accessibility guidelines. The second set of codes are for expressing the single accessibility feature of that specific ebook, meaning I have an interactive TOC, I have an index with full links to each index term, I have alternative text for images, I have math formulas in MathML. So to describe what is accessible within your publication. And last, we have a third set of terms that allows us to link to detailed accessibility information. This is important because in case you have a certifier, having this cross-link allow the end user to cross-verify that what you claim is correct. And so we have links to the publisher website for telling more about accessibility, to a trusted intermediate, which is normally a certifier, or to an online store. So how do we put this accessibility metadata in Onyx? We use some XML tags. The main tag is a product form feature element. I will show you this metadata in few slides, which has 2 childs. One is the product form feature type, which is always 09. 09 meaning I'm expressing something about the accessibility of this ebook. It actually stands for accessibility detail of electronic publication. And then we have the product form feature value, which is based on the code of the list 196. So for example, here you have an extraction of an Onyx code. Here you can see I have product form feature with product form feature type 09, meaning I'm telling something about accessibility. And in product form feature value, I'm using 03. 03 is based on the code list 196 of Onyx. We have an online reference to that, and we can see that 03 means EPUB accessibility specification 1.0 level AA. So what I'm claiming here? I'm claiming that this publication is conformant to the EPUB accessibility 1.0 level AA with this snippet of code. So I will, in case I want to say something else, like I have an interactive TOC, I would just copy and paste the product form feature and change the product form feature value from 03 to the code for TOC, which is like 11 down here. All right, we can move forward with this, and we can move to the EPUB metadata, starting from the schema.org side. Schema.org is a kind of standard for expressing metadata on websites. And for creating a publication that is compliant with EPUB accessibility guidelines, you have to put accessibility metadata within your publication. And this metadata is a mix of schema.org values and Dublin core values, are two different kind of standards. Let's see which are the values of the fields of schema.org metadata for accessibility that are available in a EPUB. We have access mode, which is mandatory. That means a human sensory perceptual system that is necessary to process or perceive the content. One example is like visual, meaning I can read all the content using my eyes, or textual, meaning I can read all the content with a textual representation. That means I have alternative text for images and all that. Accessibility hazard, it means if you have potential hazards in the content, like normally flash or motion simulation or something like that. Accessibility features, like the interactive DOC, the index, alternative text, map formulas, and so on. The accessibility summary, which is a non-machine readable field, which is a free text field where you can put all the information that you cannot express with the other fields. So the idea of the accessibility summary is not to duplicate what you already said with the machine readable metadata, but if you have to add something else, you can use that specific field. And then we have access mode sufficient, which is super interesting field, even if it's optional, as well as accessibility summary. Accessibility summary is not mandatory, not anymore. It was mandatory in the previous version. Now it's optional. While access mode sufficient means a sensory that you can use for getting the whole content of the publication. For example, if I have access mode sufficient equal to visual, means that with my eyes, I can have the whole content of the publication. I can get the whole content of the publication. While if I have access mode sufficient equal textual, means that with the text, I can get the whole content of the publication. So I have alternative description for images, I have semantics and all that. That means I can use a screen reader or a text-to-speech engine that can read the text and transform it in audio, or I can read the content via Braille display. So access mode sufficient equal to textual is an important information for all the visually impaired users. Then we have the EPUB metadata based on Dublin Core for expressing also other information about accessibility. The conforms tool that allows you to tell to which accessibility standard you conforms, the certifier of your publication, if any, the certifier credential, and the certifier report. Okay, again, here you have an extract of the metadata section of an EPUB file. This is normally inside the OPF file of an EPUB publication. Don't know if you ever edit an EPUB publication. Inside the EPUB publication, you have the OPF file that manages different information. And within that file, you have the metadata section. As you can see, in this case, you set the metadata using the meta element. And in the property, you set the field that you want to set. In this case, access mode, and the value is here. So access mode textual, and then we have access mode visual, because this book can be read both with the textual representation or the visual representation. In this case, the reference is to this other link. You will have these slides at the end of the webinar. Okay, but how can we create accessibility metadata? There are two tools that can help us. One is ACE Smart by Daisy. It's an online tool. It's not ACE. It's an online tool where you start from ACE, you grow through a checklist to check the conformance, and then you have two different tabs. One for discovery, that means EPUB metadata. For example, I can say I have alternative text, I have MAFML, and I'm using ARIA. Then hazards, I don't have hazards. Access mode, textual and visual, and access mode sufficient textual, the accessibility summary. And when I click generate, it generates this code that I can copy and paste in my EPUB. So it helps me, it has a user interface to actually generate the metadata. Similarly, on the tab distribution, I can say I am compliant with LIA if you really are. Normally, only LIA is allowed to use this code because it depends from our quality assurance system. I comply with EPUB specification 1.1. I have table of contents, alternative text, MAFML, blah, blah, blah. I'm compliant with WCAG 2.2, level AA. I can add the other fields and click in generated. As you can see, I have all the tags, and these tags can be copied and pasted into your Onyx record if you have one, or you have to ask to your aggregator or distributor on how to create it. So with this Daisy, Smart by Daisy, you can actually manually create metadata, but it requires knowledge and time. That's why I'm showing you another tool, which is, it has not a user interface, it's a command line tool, but it's interesting. It's developed by the Readium Foundation, which normally develops a reading solution, but this tool was meant for reading apps, and it has a functionality to being able to auto-generate part of metadata based on the actual file. It's not able to generate any metadata, but for some metadata, it can do that. Something that you have to run by the command line. I will show you how it works. Okay, I've run my this script on my publication, and down here, this publication has not accessibility metadata, and down here you can see that the script tells me that e-access, that I can use access mode visual, I can add access mode visual to my metadata, and the accessibility feature table of contents, because those two things are available in my publication. I mean, it has a lot of limits, this approach, but for sure it's a good starting point if you don't know how to start and which metadata put in your publication. But you have to pay attention, and you have to care about your metadata, because we see a lot of mistakes in the publication that we validate. What are the common mistakes that we find? The first mistake is accessibility metadata that does not reflect the actual content of the accessible file. Like in the accessibility metadata, the publication claims to use MAFML for math formulas, but it is a fiction book without any math formula. So the metadata will wrongly lead your end user to a decision. So that's really important. or the lack of conformance to a specification. So there are some accessibility metadata, but the conformance metadata is missing, is lacking. And we see the accessibility summary telling that something is available in the publication in written words, in English or in French or in Italian. But that information that is passed through the accessibility summary is not conveyed also with the machine readable metadata, even if it's possible. Like in the accessibility summary is written, alt text are available, but then the alt text feature is not present in the metadata. And this is a shame because, I mean, you are telling something in a specific language that cannot be interpreted by machines, while you can do the same with just a small code, and that will open you to a broader audience. Let's now move to how to distribute accessibility metadata. As I mentioned, we have two different rows for the same information. We have seen, we started with EPUB metadata and ONIX. We have seen that the information that you can represent are more or less the same. We will speak about the crosswalk between the two formats that has improved a lot. So the ONIX metadata are normally distributed along the supply chain, unlinked to your file. So you have to speak to your aggregator or to your digital distributor to ask them how to provide them ONIX and accessibility metadata in ONIX so that they can ingest them and redistribute them to their clients. While EPUB metadata are normally embedded in the publication, and so they go through the publication. Why it's important to have those two metadata and to have both? Because normally, like library systems or small ebook stores do not get the actual file. They only get it when a customer or a reader requires it. So they do not have access to the EPUB metadata, while they always have access to the ONIX metadata. And sometimes is the other way around. So maybe your publication is distributed by a professor or whatever. Let's say it's a free publication. We are not we are not breaking the law, and you don't have ONIX in that use case, but you have the metadata within the publication. So you need both. And another tool that can help you in embedding accessibility metadata in your publication is Ace by Daisy. I think you are quite familiar with Ace by Daisy. Here I've run Ace by Daisy on a publication I have. I have few errors here, but let's say that most of these errors are about metadata. And if you go in the metadata tab, down here, you have the edit button. Clicking on the edit button, it opens this editor. It's the only thing that you can edit in Ace. Ace is normally a checker, but the only thing that you can edit is accessibility metadata. So here you can put the access mode. Now you are pro on access mode, so you say you add visual, access mode sufficient textual, the accessibility feature area, and then accessibility hazards known, accessibility summary, since it's optional, I will leave that empty. Accessibility feature down here, another is index, and I add another accessibility feature, which is print page numbers. Okay, now that I've done, I can click save. Ace saves the metadata in the EPUB. It's not the actual EPUB that you drag and drop on it, so you have to do another thing for actually assessing it, but it runs again against the metadata, checking for the metadata that you have. And if you go in metadata in the metadata tab, you can click Save Zip EPUB, and you have the EPUB. So for putting metadata within an EPUB using ACE, you have to click Edit, put the metadata, click Save, and then click Save again to actually get the publication. But today is a great day. It's a perfect day because we have a great news to you. After 2 years of work, a lot of calls and emails with a small team of Fondazione LIA, the ABC Consortium and the DAISY Consortium, with 2 great people, Laura Brady and Richard Orme. We worked with Adobe to embed accessibility metadata in the EPUB export of Adobe. So you don't have to add accessibility metadata after the EPUB export, but within the EPUB export. This new feature is available from today. So was released this night, is available in version 19.2 of Adobe. So you have to update it. And I can show it to you. I can show it to you. If you go in the export and you select EPUB reflowable and you go down to metadata, you have a new tab here, accessibility. And again, you can see that you have all the fields that we spoke about. So accessibility feature, area, index MFML, hazards known, access mode sufficient, access mode sufficient, textual, accessibility summary conforms to WCAG AA, EPUB accessibility, certified by Fondazione LIA, and the credentials are fondazionelia.org. And that's all. You just click OK, and inside your publication, voila, you have the accessibility metadata. So please, let's make a great applause to Adobe that developed this feature, because it's really a game changer for all the publishers that use Adobe for producing their digital publications. So, I mean, if we had this webinar yesterday, I was not able to show you. So it's a great change. And I spoke to you about switching from EPUB metadata to Onyx metadata, just to tell you that there is a crosswalk that we are updating. And right now we have a near one-to-one mapping between Onyx metadata and EPUB metadata. So if you have one of the metadata in one of the 2 formats, you can get more or less the other standard with automatic transformation. And this is a big game changer. I think we are quite running out of time, but I will move a little bit to how LIA works. So I show you different ways to create metadata and to put metadata in the publication. And so the question that we always ask ourselves in LIA is, can't we automate this task? And our response is yes. So we have a complete system that is able to assess the quality of the accessibility of a specific publication. And the output of the system is actually the metadata, because the metadata is the best way for telling this publication is okay for accessibility or not. How does it work? We use automating tools like EPUB Check, ACE, and other tools that we developed internally that are able to do about 20% of the work. Then we have a manual quality assurance, page by page, file by file. And with that, we can get around 80% of the work. And while doing this manual work, this manual quality assurance, we compile some checklist, and the output of this checklist creates automatically the metadata. So for us, making metadata, accessibility metadata, is not a work. It's not something that we have to do manually. it's an automatic output of our workflow. And when we distribute them, I will show you here on Media Library Online website. Here I am. I'm sorry, it's in Italian. Media Library Online, it's the digital lending platform most used in Italy. And here in their homepage, you can see ebook, accessible ebooks. Those are in their homepage. You can just click here and you access to all the accessible ebooks available, more than 26,000 on their platform. We have more than 30,000. And if you click on a specific book, you see here the LIA label. That means it's accessible. And clicking on the LIA label, you get, voila, to the all accessibility information, meaning all the accessibility metadata. This page, we are reworking this page to a new design that I will present you in few clicks, but that's how it works, for example, in Italy. Okay, I'm nearly there. Displaying accessibility metadata. As Christina mentioned, we are working a lot within the World Wide Web Consortium. I'm directly involved in this task force to find a common way to display accessibility metadata to the end user. We had a call 2 hours ago about this. We have calls every 2 weeks, and we are doing a lot of work. I'm co-editor of these specs. And what we proposed was to group the metadata with more than 40, 50 different values. We can group them in a semantic way and to identify a common name for the group and a textual description to explain also to non-technical what we are meaning with that specific metadata. And we started with some skepticism. People were not sure if a lot of metadata can fit different UI and UX. So we asked our designer to help us in try to make some mock-ups with accessibility metadata in very well-known ebook stores. Here you have an example. It's an Italian bookstore. This bookstore, I think, is quite known. These are mock-ups, it's not real pages. But as you can see, we found out a way with icons, tabs, and text to actually give accessibility information to the end user in a way that is user-friendly. This is another example, and this is on mobile. And this is more or less the proof of concept that we are working on right now. This is the draft of how we will display accessibility metadata on Fondazione LIA website. We have 6 different groups: conformance, telling the specification to which you conform, the reading mode, the details about the content, so the accessibility features, the accessibility summary, if present, telling something more about the machine readable metadata, additional accessibility information with all the technical and legal part, and others. And in reading mode, like non-visual reading is fully supported, you will click on it and you have a more explanatory description that should be understandable by everyone, like text and images alternatives available in computer-generated speech and braille. This is not something that we invented. This is based on the international specification that we are developing within W3C. So if you have to develop a user interface for displaying accessibility metadata, I ask you to please follow the international accessibility user experience guidelines. In this way, the user will have a common look and feel, common experience across different catalogs, across different stores. And if you find something that is not available in the specs, if you find something that do not fit your needs, please write. It's open to everyone, and we are more than happy to find specific use cases to more develop the specs to improve the specs. So please, please, please do not reinvent the wheel. Last but not least, I'm at the end. What you can do if your publication is not accessible? Please, let's say that, okay, it's not a good thing, it's not a good way to go. But you may know that for at least for the European Accessibility Act, there are some exemptions. I will dig into them. And so we worked with both the W3C and editor to being able to express this exemption through metadata. In this way, a publisher can say, okay, this publication is not accessible, but because I exempted. And it's quite important for a legal point of view and for the end user point of view. So the three exemptions that are present in the European Accessibility Act are the disproportionate burden, is a super complex word to me, the fundamental alteration, and the micro enterprise. Disproportionate burden, speaking in a super simple way, eventually Christina can add something or we can discuss in the Q&A, means that it's too expensive to make that a specific publication accessible with the revenue that you forecast to have on that specific publication. Fundamental alteration means that for making a specific publication accessible, you have to change and completely change your publication. Normally for most of publication is not the case, but micro enterprise, it means that you have an annual turnover of less than 2 million euros and less than 10 employees. So these are the three requirements. Okay. And as I mentioned, we have two ways in Onyx and EPUB metadata to express the exemption. So in case your publication is not accessible for one of the three exemptions, I suggest you to express this with the two standards that we have seen. You may ask, we are at the Q&A, you may ask why I spoke all this webinar about Onyx and EPUB metadata and not about MARC, because in MARC, the work about accessibility metadata is starting right now. We are involved in MARC to help the community to not reinvent the wheel in that case and to adopt part of what is already available. But we don't have at the moment a robust way to express accessibility metadata in MARC. That's why I spoke only about EPUB metadata and Onyx. And that's it. I think, okay, we are at the top of the hour and we have few minutes for Q&A. And yeah.
Thank you, Gregorio. That was great. I think we have one question already here, and it was about the new feature for InDesign, and congratulations. I know that was a lot of work. I was at the Accessibility Summit in Toronto last week, and Laura Brady gave a kind of an update on the work you'd been doing, and it's, you know, the persistence has paid off. But so the question here that was asked about this new features is, can you also save the accessibility metadata in PDF from InDesign or only EPUB?
Only EPUB.
Okay.
Yeah. Also because we produce also accessible PDFs, but accessible metadata in PDFs is something that is working right now on a standard point of view. So something that is brand new and is not available at the moment in InDesign.
Thank you. And the next question here was, what is the best process for an EPUB that has been made accessible after it's been released? Do you release it as a new version or just update the Onyx metadata?
Good question. It really depends. I think the best thing is to ask your aggregator and distributor. It really depends also on how the supply chain works. Is the supply chain able to manage updates on accessibility metadata? Yes, no. it depends, from the supply chain. Sometimes it's better to have a new ISBN and to publish the new version as a complete new version, like it's a new edition. But sometimes just fixing the accessibility thing, fix and publish just a new version without a new ISBN, let's say, is fine. We do not require to the publisher we work with to apply a new ISBN for the accessible version, but it really depends on then how the consumer of your metadata will react to it.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but Christina, did you have any comments you wanted to add? Are you good?
No, maybe I can add just an information related with the disproportionate burden, that I just think it's quite a complex way of calculating it, because everything should be calculated in comparison with the advantage of the people with disabilities. So it's not only the fact that it costs too much or too low, and probably also the overall income of the company will be considered, because if it costs maybe too much to you, but there is a wide audience of people with disability and you are a quite big company, I don't think this could be invoked. And in any case, the disproportionate burden is a specific request. So it's not just that you may tell you need to prepare the documentation, you need to have the calculation and so on. And if they ask, you must demonstrate how you have evaluated that.
That's really helpful. It's not just saying, it's not,
No,
you can't just declare yes yourself,
Yes.
because you don't want to go to the trouble or can't for whatever reason, for sure.
What is quite complicated is that the legislation apply to, in some area like this one, the disproportionate burden or the alteration is not specific for publication, is not specific for the publishing industry. So the rules can apply to bank ATM or to many different element, product and service that apply that should be compliant with the requirement of the legislation. So what is needed is to try to understand what could be considered in the publishing industry, not in general, because the rule for the disproportionate burden are for every product and service included in the directive.
Okay, yes, that's a good point. It's not just books that we're talking about in the directive. I don't see any other questions here at the moment. So unless Gregorio, was there any other points that you wanted to bring up before we close for the day? Oh, look, we have a question. Excellent. There we go. So the question is from Heather: would disproportionate burden be more likely to apply to deep blacklist where only a few copies sell?
I think it's for Christina, this question.
Yes. If the cost to produce the accessible version will be too high, but in any case, you must demonstrate it. You must be prepared to demonstrate it. You just not can tell, I don't have it because it's too costly. You need to explain why. And for example, the fundamental alteration may be it's more related for product than for services, but it could be if you have a book that you have make a completely different layout, or cannot be really must be really changed to create the accessible version, that is the case. But if you have a book with a lot of images, you need to put the alternative description as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that another element that we have yet to see from the European Accessibility Act is also how it's implemented in different markets. So I think that'll be really interesting to see in the next 5 years or so, and how ready we'll be to respond to that.
Yes.
when we start to see that in action. So hopefully we'll have more funding for more webinars and more research on the topic. I think that might be the last question we saw. And seeing that five after 2, people probably have to get back to their offices.
There is another question on the different market.
Okay, here we go. Perfect. I'm happy to stay here.
The majority of the country have implemented the legislation more or less as it is in their national legislation. The main different point that can be defined at national level are the authorities, the enforcement authorities, that every country has its own. And the other one could be the penalties, how much you have to pay if you don't comply with the law. That could be different also, because also this is not related with digital publication or ebooks or resolution, but it's for the law itself. So this is another choice that may be done, that can be done by every country. But as far as we saw, more or less the interpretation was similar. So the legislation was considered, the most important element of the legislation are the same in the majority of countries that they've implemented in the national law.
And then have some. Oh, go ahead.
No, there is another question. It's in the chat. Sorry.
I cannot see the chat from where I am.
I don't know where the chat is.
It says, can you read it? How will enforcement be done on imported Canadian items? Very good question.
It could be on the, if in Europe, I mean, just to explain, the legislation is to protect the European customer. So if a customer or someone inform the authorities that the content or the service is not compliant, then the authorities will inform, will ask, will give a request to the owner of the service and ask for complying within, let's say, 1 month, 1 week, 1 day. And if they are not compliant, they may ask for a fee, for a penalty.
I don't know if there are any other questions.
I don't think there are important items, are items that are sold in Europe. So we are not speaking about someone having the rights or import the content. If you have a distributor or if you have someone selling on behalf of you in a country, then this could be the case. Because we are always speaking about digital content. So really, we are focused on digital content. It's not that you have a print book that is imported. So it's
yeah, for sure. Do we know, have some countries already started implementing the directives? So is that already?
No, the majority of, I think most of European countries have implemented. Not all of them, but most.
Okay, that's good to know. Yes, because there's 2025 is the deadline, but the people.
It was a deadline, but there are some laggards, let's say. But I think the biggest country have already implemented it.
Okay, that's great. That's great to know. I think don't see any other questions. All right. Okay. Well, for everyone, just a nice comment. Thank you very much. Kudos to everyone doing such fine work. And yes, I have to agree. I've seen some really great work being done, in multiple markets in Europe and Canada. Also, I was very inspired, very excited about the work being displayed at the Accessibility Summit that also included work by Fondazione LIA and EDR Lab. It's very exciting to see what is happening, and that there's that, Daisy, of course, all the work that's being done across markets to, create standards, create awareness. And I hope we get to do more of this in the future and keep learning. So we'll keep everybody posted when we have the brochure. That's the follow-up to both these webinars. We will be sending them through our regular communications channels. So please, everybody, stay tuned and keep an eye on your inbox for more information. And of course, the recording of this webinar will be up on our website soon, so that you can go back to it and sort of review some of the tips on and tools on working with code, and any other information that might be useful to you. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Gregorio. Thank you, Christina, as always, for being here. Thank you to our interpreters. You do fantastic work. I have no idea how you managed to do that, but it's fantastic. And thanks to everybody who joined us. And thank you to ACAP and, of course, the Government of Canada. We will have, as usual, we look forward to getting your feedback on our work. So we'll send out a link to our survey. It's also provided in the accessible PDF that you received with the registration information. So if you'd like to go and give us some feedback on the webinar through that survey, we would be very grateful. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a great evening and afternoon, depending where you are in the world. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Merci.